All right, coming into another episode of the Iron Size Podcast. This is a Q&A. This is the first time we've actually had this entire crew in the studio at the same time. I'm stoked.
Wow.
I got Steven to my left. Yep. We've got Ryan across from me, and then we have the lovely CC English on the other side of the
lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Get shit. What is that?
Wearing pink today. The rest of us are wearing dark as usual.
Black.
So Q&A, I love Q&As because it gets us an opportunity to kind of go short on some specific topics that people have asked us over time. We haven't done one of these for a while. The questions have sort of piled up. So thanks to the audience who have provided these questions for us. We appreciate it, and we're going to get to it here. Let's start. So we have these because we have the entire group today, we can't cover all the questions today, but I do want to kind of get some stuff that hits kind of on the the specialty parts of kind of what you guys do, that being Ryan and Steven in here, and the things that you kind of nerd out on. So I know there's some nutrition and lifestyle stuff in here, and not that Ryan doesn't cover that, and vice versa. There's obviously a lot of training stuff that Steven handles here on a regular basis as well. But then we got a little bit of an interesting crew. I'm interested to find out if there's any debates in here today that we haven't had yet. So,
okay.
Ready, set, go. We're going to start with this is a fitness question.
I've recently seen more people use the trap bar in gym for deadlifts. Why would someone use that as opposed to traditional deadlifts with a barbell?
It's a valid question.
Mm-hmm.
I think people kind of looking across the gym going, what are other people doing? And I've never used that before, and it's big and awkward. And how does that help me? How does that hurt me? I don't want to look like an idiot doing it. Let's talk about it. Where do you want to start? I love the trap bar. I think it's great for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I do too. And the other thing is that the trap bars come in different, I guess, masses or loads.
Yeah.
So
Sizes.
Sizes, yeah.
Yeah. I like the one. I would love to get the one where there's an open side
entry.
on one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that because there's a lot more stuff you can play with. With some like single leg stuff that's hard to do with a closed trap bar. So you're actually trapped in.
So I think when they really started kind of making their way into the mainstream gyms, it was all about how much weight you could put on there and basically do your deadlift,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people got enamored by that because they were able to do way more on the trap bar than they were with the traditional barbell. And so that might be the answer to this person's question right out of the gate, because you can do more weight, which, again, why? Do you want to do more weight? Well, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered there, but I think that's why people, start to gravitate towards this, because they recognize they can do more loads. I think we should do more of a load. There can be more intensity there at some level. That's also a trap. I think no pun intended with the trap bar.
Yeah.
I think it's a good call out, just that it gives you ability to get over something and pull it from the floor, overcome that inertia, right? In a position where you may be and likely will be a bit stronger.
Yep.
Which then allows you to apply that force differently. And that's all good if we're looking for gains, strength gains, and also just some variety in our workouts. So I think that the base level stuff it's where your center of mass is as compared to the bar's center of mass. And what that's doing is it's loading it more towards your hips, so you're not as cantilevered, the key word there being lever armed, out over that bar. And so you're able to distribute the load and the force that's being created there through the hips and the quads and the back in an evenly dispersed pattern, in order to, and you technically, or I guess theoretically would be the term, you're more efficient there.
Yes.
So that's one way to look at the trap bar and why it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, the leverages are a lot easier for a lot of people versus the strict bar out in front of you. It reduced some of the joint angles are a little bit more mechanically advantageous versus working with that big long lever, especially for certain people's body types. And it's honestly, it's just an easier load for a lot of people to initially feel if your goal is to really try to build some more maximal strength quickly. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that a lot of people don't think about and they don't utilize a lot, and we've talked about deadlifting from the floor with a standard barbell, is it reduces the range of motion with the trap bar in almost any setup you're going to have. So that range of motion reduction is a lot easier for people to maintain good posture, good positioning, and get into those same joint angles while producing a lot of force, things like that. So
so it's changing ranges of motion, motion for people. And I think you don't have to just deadlift with the trap bars. There's some other good things you can do. I mean, like doing a carry with the trap bars can be an excellent exercise in terms of creating alt strength in a lot of different areas, but total body strength. it's very stable. In a lot of ways, it can feel and look very awkward because generally, sort of, let's just put it like the wingspan or the width on one of these things is. So you have to have
a little bit longer.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have some space to work with because it's what you call it longer. I'm thinking wider. That way, and versus like kettlebells or dumbbells, that you're holding to your side. So if you got the space to work with it, I really like that. Again, because you can get those things off, you can get that thing off the floor, you can carry it, and it's easily kind of put down or dropped, and then you can restart generally pretty quickly. Versus like if you dropped those kettlebells or you had to put those down, it's lower to the ground. It's a little bit more awkward to get up. And so when I think about this, I'm not thinking about like your athlete. I'm more thinking about like your general exerciser, who's really trying to just get it all done the right way, or reduce their risk of injury, be efficient, all those kinds of things. So another good use case for the trap bar. One of the things you talked about was like where it is with regard to its height from the ground. So if you're using standard plates, right, you're going to be the same height off the ground every time, whether it's a barbell or the trap bar. The trap bars generally have on one side, which you would think of as the top, will have handles on either side that are a little higher than the height of the bar. Again, changing your start position or your height from height from the ground. So that's going to change your joint angles. But if you flip that bar over, oftentimes those handles are at bar height. So if you're looking for a little bit more range of motion and you're trying to practice, and kind of get used to it, that's a good place to go too. I would always suggest somebody starts kind of on the top side, kind of figure that out, kind of figure out how you load that up, what that does to your posture, where you feel that loading, your range of motion through there, and then how to challenge that. There are all kinds of things you could do. You could do it on a box and get some more depth. There's lots of stuff you could do with the trap bar.
Yeah. I think the last thing I would add if we're thinking for the athlete is there's kind of two things with this is one, those joint angles that you're going to get into a trap bar are a lot more of what you'd get into like an athletic stance where a power position, right? Where you're in some dorsiflexion, knees travel forward, some hip flexion, some knee flexion, bending at the hips and knees and things like that. That is more advantageous for a power position, explosive work, and would transfer more to athletics than a pure deadlift might not be those same joint angles and a pure squat might not be those same joint angles. So even the general exerciser, it can be a low barrier of entry to kind of start handling some heavier loads, but it can also be something you can play with some like explosive work too, explosive high pulls, things like that. With the trap bar.
Shrug pulls.
Shrug pulls, exactly. Versus even if you're trying to get that maximal power output and not doing something like a power clean or a hang clean or something like that.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys that really like the jump shrug pulls and things like that. It's a great piece of equipment to do that on. As we're talking about the athlete, one of the other things that you might think about is if you're starting to add power and speed work to your program, trap bars are very easy to attach bands to. And they're very stable in that sense. So if you're starting to add these extra variables to your stuff, when I say stuff, just your workouts, to your programming and things like that, trap bars are excellent that way. I just real quick on the pieces of equipment. If you're thinking about getting into the market for a trap bar, right? There are a lot of sizes. There's a lot of shapes. I would do a little research. They're not going to be cheap. There's a lot of metal in one of those. Yes. And they also, because there's a lot of metal in them, they typically weigh quite a bit. So whereas your standard barbell might weigh 45 pounds or 20 kilos, when you start getting into these larger trap bars, they can weigh up to between 60 and 70 pounds. Yeah. So something to consider. I mean, I'm not just talking about cost, but like where you put it and how you store it. There are some that have different configurations where they're a little shorter, and maybe that cage that you step inside to is a little bit smaller footprint. Keep that in mind if you're a big, tall, lanky person. If you're over 6'2", I've seen some of those things be problematic for guys getting inside those smaller cages.
100%.
Ryan, you got some height on you, so you may have experienced that.
Yes, and I have long ass legs.
So that might not be cool. We do not get paid by Rogue, but I will give them a plug on this. They make a very solid trap bar.
Oh yeah, love it.
We have 3 of them here. I think they get used every single day. They get abused every single day. They have held up for the last 7 years. They have been
indestructible.
They are, man. They are beasts. Again, there could be a downside to that if you're limited on space and whatever. But I really like their bars. There's a lot of other companies that make good stuff, but that's where I would start.
I'm still seeing the scale weight decrease, but I'm hearing from some people that being in a deficit for too long can be detrimental. How so? Especially if I see that I'm continuing to lose weight.
Well, we've covered this several times, Stephen, and I think the reason it's being asked is because people can never hear it enough in trying to understand this concept of metabolic adaptation. And let's walk through it, man. Where you want to start with that?
Well, it sounds like this might be somebody who is most likely crash dieting, or someone who is in a significant caloric deficit. And when you're in a significant caloric deficit, yes, initially you tend to lose weight, especially if you're somebody who has a significant amount of weight to lose. And it can be very easy to fall into the trap of, well, that number on the scale is getting lower and it's getting lower and it's getting lower.
Awesome.
That's
still
good.
making progress.
Yeah,
Progress.
I'm making progress. It's working. But if you stay in that deficit for too long, number one, this is how most people run into plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are in that significant deficit for too long, you are likely underfed, you're undernourished. If you are exercising, you're probably not getting the same benefits or results out of that exercise. And while your scale weight may be decreasing, if you were to actually get your body fat percentage measured or your body composition measured, there is a high likelihood that your body fat percentage is not dropping as quickly as your scale weight is dropping. So you may be losing weight, but not actually getting less fat, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense if you're following this Ozempic train at all, and kind of what's happening there in terms of the muscle wasting that goes on with that medication more often than not. And that is, the scale is one measure, right? Of what's happening, that, in terms of total mass. The important thing to understand is what that mass is made up of that you're actually losing. You talked just a little bit about the being in the deficit. Can we talk about some of the other, detrimental effects or things that people may not realize could be going on? Well, okay, so maybe I lose a little muscle. I'm cool with that. I'm cool if I lose a couple pounds. What are the downsides to being in the deficit too long outside of, I don't want to hit a plateau with my weight loss?
Yeah, so I would say for some people who have significant amounts of weight to lose, like maybe more than 50 pounds, there's going to be some muscle loss that occurs when they're losing weight. We'd like to keep that to no more than 25% of total weight loss. So that is a rule of thumb. Say someone who is obese, someone who is 350 pounds and they're trying to be 200 pounds. In the course of losing 150 pounds, they're going to lose some muscle mass. But we'd like for that to be no more than 25% of total weight loss. So when someone is in this deficit for an extended period of time, they're losing weight, great. Maybe I'm losing some muscle. Maybe I'm losing muscle too rapidly. But more importantly, they're getting deeper into a hole of undernourishment. So that could be, we're not getting the macros, we're not getting the micros that we need.
Yeah, obviously that becomes problematic with all the things that you're expecting your body to do, up to and including losing body fat or quote unquote weight. Whether that 25% is, I think about that, as hard as people work to put on muscle, to make, to have 25% as being of muscle mass loss to be an acceptable amount.
Seems like a lot.
Seems like a lot, but you have to look at the bigger picture here. If you've got somebody that's got 150 pounds to lose, what's better?
Yeah.
The likelihood is they've built up an abnormal amount of muscle mass just to carry around their excess weight. Yeah. I mean, there's somebody that I'm thinking of. Ryan knows, who I'm referring to, who, muscle mass wise, way above average for someone of their height.
Yes.
And has a significant amount of weight to lose. So over this process, they're going to lose some of that muscle mass to get back to what's more appropriate for someone of their stature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, people can kind of see this in, people that have lost a lot of weight, or you've got somebody that's overweight but seems to carry their weight in a different way. And so I'll just throw this out there. What you just said right there, I think could be confusing for people. Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You just said, we're talking about somebody that's 150 pounds overweight, but yet they have a ton of muscle mass. How does this happen? Well, think about that. Over time, it's like the boy in the bull, that was carrying the calf up the hill. I forget
I haven't heard this.
Greek. I think it's a Greek.
Yeah.
It's from Greek mythology, where he starts carrying this calf up the hill. And as the calf grows, and he carries his calf up and down the hill every day, but the calf quickly turns into a steer, which then ultimately turns into a bull. And as the the calf is progressing into the full-size bull, so is the boy into a man, and so forth in terms of building muscle mass along the way, so that there's this progressive overload.
Yeah, it's a general principle.
That's happening. So when you think about that as somebody's going through their weight gain journey, if you will, their body is having to adapt to this. And I've seen, man, I had a client once, actually here at Red Dot, it was after we started Red Dot, who she was very big up top. This is a female. She's very big up top. So she had very big breasts and carried a lot of abdominal fat and a lot of fat around her thoracic region. And everybody probably knows somebody like that. But down low, she's actually very lean. She didn't have a lot. She had a little bit of little pooch down below the waist and a belly on her.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But her legs were actually very lean. And damn, I mean, the quads, hams, glutes, and calves on this lady were impressive.
Yeah.
I was like, man, if she loses about 75 pounds
got some wheels,
off top, dude, she's gonna be banging in a set of jeans kind of thing. Like to think like that. She didn't start that way. I'd seen pictures of her when she was younger, and she built this muscle mass over time, having to support her body and trying to be somewhat active, right? She wasn't sitting around on a. This was a lady that was really struggling with her weight, and she had some other metabolic issues that she had been faced with that I think created this challenge for her. But the point of this is, not to get too far off track, is you can be overweight and still have plenty of muscle mass, even enough to maybe take off. So going into the deficit, going back to the beginning of the question without getting off track here, like even if you're that person, we need to be managing this, because we don't want to lose too much muscle mass over time, even with that. What I think of as like that, man, that just sounds like such a large number, that 25%. But when you look at the totality of it, when you put in, when everything's all in, that seems like a very acceptable number, at the end of the day.
How important is it that I incorporate squats into strength training? I have bad knees and my doctor told me to avoid squats.
I mean, I don't want to go against what doctors say, but at the same time, like, we squat every day, multiple times a day.
Well, we don't need to get off a low toilet.
I was just going to say, every time you sit down to go to the bathroom, or to get into your car or sit down at your desk or whatnot, I mean, that's still a squat, or it's considered maybe a box squat, right? So I would say incorporating squats, that's a function of life. And so in order to maintain that function of life, you need to practice that function of life.
Primary importance. Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. Man, I mean, it's wild to me too, because I think a lot of where that gets convoluted between, let's say, the health practitioner to the individual, to the patient, to the general masses is, most people, when they think you need to not be doing squats, is they think, oh, this person hasn't exercised. You need to not be going and doing barbell back squats from the get-go. So the bigger thing is not that you should never be squatting. You should be squatting, but it just needs to be to your current capacity and your whatever capacity, whatever range that you need to get into to function in life, whatever load. So yes, everyone should be squatting every single week, and that should be part of your strength training regimen. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that everyone needs to be back squatting to full range of motion right from the get-go with no capacity, or front squatting or whatever. It could be a goblet, box squat, or whatever it is that's your capacity. But you need to be able to do that as a human.
Yeah, I kind of relate this to like the people associate diet with caloric deficit. Like those are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And you're convoluting things, as you just sort of alluded to there. Yeah, it's interesting that people associate the squat with the barbell. Like, that is a piece of equipment that you might use to perform that movement pattern. So, and yes, walking out of the doctor's office hearing, I've never squat again. I've heard that looked at, I've seen that looked at and be perceived in a couple different ways. One of those is, oh, thank God, he just gave me an excuse not to fucking exercise anymore.
Beautiful,
right?
especially squats.
So let me go to physical therapy and get the piece of paper that says, and this is going to fix my problem, and somebody else pays for it and whatever else. That's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is complete devastation by the person that just got that news. Both of which are in my mind are incorrect ways to look at this, right? It would be like, what did I hear versus what was meant? And I think the practitioner needs to take way more care in delivering that message. But I also can't totally blame them, because I think the patient has responsibility in taking care in how they receive a message and getting some clarity on what that actually means.
You know, this takes us down another tangent, though. I mean, we've talked to people that are in physical therapy or becoming physical therapists, and there's a huge disconnect that they are also seeing as far as practitioners and the practitioner's own relationship with exercise and strength training or lack thereof. So, I mean, if it's happening in that discipline, I guarantee you it's probably happening with medical doctors as well.
Oh,
tenfold.
100%. I think we've seen it. We see it all the time. There's a frustration there. I'm not blaming doctors for, being wrong or doing bad things. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying maybe you lack some education and maybe you lack the ability. And what I mean by education is your ability to deliver information in a way that's meaningful. Because if you're telling a client they should never squat again, I have big questions about your depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge, and that's going to create some issues.
It's a red flag in
There's
general.
a responsibility on both parties.
100%.
Giving a blanket statement in general, and in all these cases, whether it's nutrition or exercise, is where an absolute truth of you should never squat again. That's where the big issue comes.
And then accepting that as truth or as gospel.
Yeah.
That's the other side.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to say. You guys nailed it. So coming all the way back, like how important is it? It's important to going back to what Cece said, as a function of life, you should be doing them and doing them regularly. Now, how you're doing them based on your current situation, your past, your present, and where you're trying to go, that's determined by the individual and their goals, right? And again, their history and things like that. But there are many, many ways to perform a squat and, to walk out of there because you've married yourself to, oh, well, he said or she said as the doctor, I should never squat again. And you're relating that to a barbell back squat. Well, that's just, that's pretty limiting and a little ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I would add is that there's kind of two parts to this. Is one, I think it's sometimes it's also learning your body, whether it's individually or from a coach, of what feels good for your body. So yeah, it may not be, you may never be proficient at doing barbell back squats or maybe front squats because of the knees or whatever, but finding what works for you and loading that to the ability that you can. And the last thing, we know now that the best way to not be able to do something is by stopping doing it. So if you stop squatting or stop loading your knees, you're never going to be able to have that capacity. So when you're, I hear people who are 35, 30, and someone tells them this, and then they're just, okay, for the next 40, 50 years of my life, I just accept I'm never going to do that thing. That's the great way to never be able to load your knees, right? Until you need to. So we know that anything can be, it's all about titrating the right dose and the right range of motion, the right response, the right load, all these different things around whatever, whether it's a bad knee, a bad back, a bad shoulder, whatever. It's finding the right things that work for you and not just throwing your hands up in the air and not participating.
Mm-hmm.
I like this question too, because I think it's commonly asked inside somebody's head, but not necessarily publicly. So in fact, I don't think I've ever been asked this question to my face, only in this manner. And it is,
what does a nutrition coach actually do?
I think it's actually a great question and a really good topic to talk about, because I think number one, I think there's a misconception about this. The other thing is I think people, because there's a misconception, they may immediately go to that's just, everybody should be able to do this. They don't need a coach to be able to do this, kind of thing. So when they hear us talk about the lifestyle pieces, the challenges that we're helping people through, if that's not your challenge, that might not resonate with you. So I get that, but God, nutrition coaching is super broad, and I think that may speaks to the question itself. Like, what the hell is nutrition coaching? What the hell do you actually do around here, Steven?
Define your role, please.
What the hell? Let's defend yourself.
3 sentences.
The funny thing is actually one of our colleagues here, one of our newer trainer colleagues here, actually asked me that the other day.
Oh, I love this.
I think because he was trying to communicate to maybe his client about, having a consult.
Yeah.
And he was more or less like, so what is it that you actually do?
Wait, didn't our junior coaches sit down with you at the very beginning?
Yes, they actually got a very clear firsthand experience of what I do, but maybe we forgot. But in any case, the misconception, we'll start with that. The misconception is usually based on people's experience that they have with dietitians or clinical nutritionists that they are referred to by their GP. And usually those conversations are, number one, it's a one-time meeting that they have with this dietitian, 45 minutes, however long it is. Usually very broad, very general. I was just speaking to somebody the other day who her experience with the dietitian was, eat 1,200 calories. Could you believe that?
Oh boy.
1,200 calories.
Right off the bat.
Just regardless of her, of her body type, of her training methods. Like, this is somebody who's resistance training on a regular basis. Just throw the 100 or 1,200 calories, throw the 0.4 grams of protein per pound of body weight, which is the bare minimum. That's like the not die dose.
Keep nitrogen balanced.
Yeah. So,
Simple.
Yeah.
This is easy.
And this is something I hear again and again this was not an experience where I felt like my individual needs were actually tended to, and someone was just trying to kind of like drop some general advice or like a general template on me. So when I first sit down with somebody, if we're having a consult or if we are going to get into a coaching relationship, I always make sure to make it quite clear. Number one, from the beginning, I am not going to sit here and write you a diet plan. This is not going to be a situation where I'm like, okay, Jim, eat this for breakfast, eat this for lunch, eat this for dinner. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Eat 3 ounces of chicken, eat, whatever. These templates that you could very easily just lift off the internet if you really wanted one of those. I feel like they've kind of been popularized by like the bodybuilding and the physique community.
Well, they work. They work there, yeah.
In that very specific context, for that very short and specific length of time, they work. But for your Gen Pop individual who's just trying to lose a little weight, trying to be a little bit more healthy, trying to follow a blow-by-blow meal plan like that is a very ineffective way to go about it. So I do not do that. What I do what I do as a nutrition coach is I work within someone's existing preferences, within their existing lifestyle, with number one, within their priorities and what is important to them, what they feel is what they are confident in working on, versus I'm collaborating with somebody versus assigning them something. So it's not a directive relationship. It's a collaborative relationship, and it's based on the individual. So I like to say, number one, I'm a counselor, I'm a facilitator, I'm the navigator or the navigation system, the GPS. Somebody, my client they have the big wooden captain's wheel and they're steering the ship, and I'm in the crow's nest letting them know, where there's a kraken or a tidal wave, an iceberg. Or you could think about it, GPS in your car, there's probably a few different routes to get where you're trying to go. You need to tell me where you're trying to go first. And then I can help you navigate, there's, construction over there. Maybe you don't want to go that way. Yeah. That's really what I'm there to do. So does that answer the question?
I think so. And I think from a larger perspective,
I love much more. But
I love that. I love that word collaboration, because that's what I see it as being, which is a very different, I think, relationship or connection that somebody might make to having a coach. They're growing up or wherever they are in their life, their coach gives them instructions on how to just do something at tell, show, do, right? Then we practice that skill, right? And then we try to get better at that skill. We drill that skill and we try to get better at it. Well, it is very much similar in terms of practicing that skill, but trying to make the connection between learning how to do like a physical skill and then putting together like a mental, emotional, behavioral skill, right? They're very, very different things. And if you think they're the same, I'll argue all day long that you are very wrong about this. Now, human learning models, adult learning models are very similar, and they can walk you through very similar paths. But what Stephen didn't say in all that is if it was just about the food that we ate, then this would be a very easy, very simple relationship and direction or navigation to be making. But it is never all about the food when it comes to somebody's dietary success. If it was all about that, this would be super simple. It's the same with exercise, right? And fitness and health. It is not that simple. And the oversimplification of those template diets or again, those food eating templates or meal plan templates, however you want to call them, is just that. They have left out so much. And what they never tell you is oftentimes when people go through those templates, the hole that it has left them in metabolically, from a health perspective, from an energy perspective, and then also from a psychological and emotional perspective, that they can't continue to eat and look the same, eat that way, perform and look a certain way for very long.
It's a very unsustainable approach.
So then what the fuck do I do, right? And that's the navigation piece. And a good coach will see a lot of that stuff coming before it comes up for you. And I would much rather be told ahead of time, like, hey, this is something we need to be looking out for based on my assessment of the things that you've told me and the things that we've discovered in the direction that we're going. I'm going to tell you right now, if you make this right turn now, you're going to shave 3 hours off your drive time to this destination we're trying to get to. Like, you could go this other way. I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be mountainous, right? There's probably going to be some obstacles or some hazards in the road. We know there's some construction going on. So I'm saying it's going to take longer. I have no idea. I just think this is going to be a shorter way based on my experience and based on the knowledge that I've obtained from you. And that is really what coaching is on the nutrition and lifestyle side of things. It isn't about like, dude, we have free guides. Go to rdfguides.com and you will find free guides on how to calculate your total daily energy need and get protein needs and get caloric needs. Again, that is a very base level of things where that a nutrition coach would get into with. If they're not talking to you about your sleep, about your psychological and emotional behaviors, right? If they're not talking to you about your workout program, if they're not talking to you about your sex drive, if they're not talking about your poop schedule, about how your gut is feeling, right? About how your energy levels are going up and down throughout the day, how your performance is during your training time, not just the training that you're doing, but what are you actually doing, and looking at that and helping you to track that performance. You're not getting nutrition coaching. You're probably getting templates.
The other thing is too, you mentioned it's about lifestyle and getting to know your client, but it's also getting to know what their diet history has been like to get them to the point where they are right now. So you know what you've been dealing with. So I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah, first couple weeks, I just observe. The first couple weeks, I'm just trying to get a feel for what your typical food, your eating schedule, what your typical eating habits are looking like. And I think a lot of times, clients come to me, they're excited, they want to get started. We have our first session. They're like, okay, what do I do now? What are my instructions? Yep. I'm like, keep doing the exact same thing you've been doing. Don't change anything.
Yeah, I think therein lies the challenge with a lot of people. And the question is, what does a nutrition coach actually do? Well, as with any question, particularly in this room, there's always a big, it depends. But I think that just laying down that basic framework, it's really helping somebody to find the right formula for them based on their unique self, right?
Mm-hmm. And I need to know what that is first.
Yeah, and so that takes some observation from a skilled, very keen, solid communicator to be able to do that and help understand the roadmap that they have to help you put together for you. They're not doing it for you. They're helping you put it together for you. Is largely based on what you do or don't do, right? So I want to give you this 3-hour route, but because you are not either being honest with me, or you're not, doing the things that we've talked or agreed that needed to get done, or you're pushing back, or there's some other thing that we need to address over here, I cannot give you that. So we are going to have to find an alternate route to this, and I'm here to do that with you. I'm just saying, if you would do these things, we could probably get from point A to point B a little faster, or point A to point Z. The cool thing about coaching, about nutrition coaching, and what I watch the most successful people do, is there are always those, well, I guess we're going to have to go through B, C, D, to get to E, when, if we did this a little bit differently, then we could get straight to E. But we're going to have to go there. Ultimately, over time, you do that enough times and people start to get it because they're learning like how to navigate.
You have to let them fail.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the most challenging aspects of it it's called the writing reflex as far as my coaching training. And we all do this where, as fitness coaches, as nutrition coaches, we probably see the issue almost immediately.
All the time.
Like, change that, do that. That's the problem right there. But if you just, you said, what was it? Tell, show, do. I don't tell, I suggest. I suggest based on the information that you've already given me, based on my personal experience, like, it might be a good idea to correct that. Sometimes people are not ready to correct that yet. And you need to have the patience to sit back and watch them fail and then arrive at the conclusion like, maybe I should correct that. But unfortunately, that's how people learn, versus when you tell someone what to do, there's immediate resistance.
Yeah, and go back to the immediacy of this. It's not like coaching a squat where I can give somebody a physical cue, they change it, boom, they feel it, and it's corrected. We fixed it, right?
Yeah, the feedback is more immediate in fitness.
Yeah, and we keep drilling that now through that rest of that set, the rest of that, that series of sets and that session, to where when they walk out of they have it. It's like a dog, training a dog, right?
It's like parenting.
That was exactly the last thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
So it's more comparison to parenting if you have kids, right? It's like, hey, here's the thing, right? Like, I'm going to give you a little room here.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the path you might take, and here's another path you might take. I need you to make a choice based on the things that you know and don't know, and understand how that may impact you or other people, one way or another. Son, sweetheart, whatever.
Yeah.
You go do you right now and see what happens. And then acknowledge or reward. But the reward for the kid is much different than it is for the adult who want the reward for them that they've already stacked up in their head is lose weight, gain muscle. But that doesn't happen in one time around the block, right? In that one decision. You have to make a series of better decisions in order to get there. What is coaching on the nutrition side? It's teaching people, or it's coaching people on how to make better decisions for themselves.
Helping them problem solve.
Yeah, so that they can work this out on their own. So I would say this, if you are a problem solver and you like being presented with solutions that you like to, or that you get to make a choice on and have power or control over that and experiment and play around a little bit, nutrition coaching is probably perfect for you if you're getting with a true, professional. If what you want is to be told exactly what to do, that's not what nutrition coaching is, and then you should,
get an app, go on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Do that.